stand the fork on end, and the manual calls for, I think it was like 15.6 fluid ounces of SS8 fork oil from Honda, and this is a 16-ounce container, so we're going to dump the whole thing right in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and chug this in there. Sit there and run out for a minute. While that's doing that, I'll talk about my tool. This is the tool that I made up for measuring your air gap. This is a syringe that I picked up at CVS. It was like $3. I went to Lowe's, picked up some small clear tubing, and then this is a piece of brake line that I found that the clear tubing slides over. I used my calipers to measure from the bottom up, used some tape to mark it, put a zip tie on it, and it doesn't have to be like exact. You know, if they say you need to have 100 and I think this one's 116 millimeters of air gap, you know, it doesn't have to be exactly 116. It can be off a little bit. You just want both of your forks to be the same. And off by a little bit, I don't mean like, well, it said 115, so I put 200 millimeters of air gap. No, you know, like a couple of millimeters. I think the manual says plus or minus like 8 millimeters. And a lot of people adjust these to you know, to play with their suspension a little, make it stiffer, or, you know, depending on their weight. So I'm going with the stock amount. Well, fluid capacity, it says 15.6 plus or minus 0.08 US fluid ounces. So, like I said, people play with this, they put different weight oils, and I'm not getting into that. I'm just going to put what it calls for in it, and we'll see how it goes. So now that our oil is in there, we need to pull that damper rod up and pump it to fill it up with fluid. To pump this a few times to get some of the air out of the bottom of the fork. Now this is a pick that I have. It's got a magnet on the bottom of it. And unfortunately, the nut on this damper rod is steel. Just takes you a minute because you're sucking in fluid as you pull it up, so just go real slow. Once you get it up towards the top, you'll be able to grab it, and then just take and pump it up and down a few times. And then you'll start getting fluid.
Looks like blood.
The other thing, you know, you pay for this Honda SS8 suspension fluid. And I'm reading the back of it, and it says, can be supplemented anywhere an automatic transmission fluid is required. You know, so basically it's just transmission fluid. But whatever. So you just want to pump it up and down quite a bit to make sure you get all the air out of the damper rod. We still got quite a bit of air bubbles coming out, so. Alright, so now that all the air is out of that, we'll go ahead and let that sink back down in there. I'm going to pump this a few more times. Alright, so now I'll check and make sure that my rod is all the way down. Okay. Who's got the dirty mind here, really? Now we're going to go ahead and measure it. So now you're just going to take and stick that down inside your tube. Make sure it's straight up and down with your zip tie sitting there. And then go ahead and suck out fluid. You want to be careful that you don't pull the end of your syringe out. I did that last time. That's why there's fluid everywhere all over the place. And then just take your bottle, squirt that fluid back into there. You basically just want to suck until you get air, and that's when you've reached that level. So this fork here is good. Alright, so now your fork is ready to go back together completely. So I go ahead and pull my damper rod back up. You're going to want to do this now rather than later. Alright. So first thing you're going to want to put in is your spring. Just pay attention to how everything came out and make sure you put it back in the way it came out. Pull that back up again. Slide the spring down. Go ahead and drop my washer down in there. That's what's called the preload adjuster tube. This is what measures your spring preload. If you get a longer one of these, you'll have more preload, less preload, whatever you want to do. This is the part that you really want it to be up. Stick that down there. And I saw my cameraman like, oh my gosh, it's going away. Which wouldn't be the end of the world because you can pull that preload adjuster back off. Let's go ahead and snap that final washer in there, and that'll actually hold it in place. So it'll only drop down so far. So now we're ready to put our damper rod adjuster back in. I don't know if this is really necessary, but last time I just kind of pumped it until I had fluid coming out just to make sure that there was no air up on the top of it, and then go ahead and spin that baby down until you hit your lock nut. And this time around you're not going to be able to lay it down to make it easy. It would be a lot nicer if I had like a vise over here. Pull it up a little, put your 14 on there, grab your 15. And just crank her down. Be careful not to slip and tip your fork over, because that would really suck. It was weird too, the manual shows you using a 24mm and tightening down on this outside piece, but that whole piece is like independent from like the inside piece. So like these two pieces will slide different from each other. Alright, so now you got everything back in. Double check your bench and make sure that you don't have like washers or something, you know, kicking around. Those are the old bushings, so I wouldn't worry about that. So now you're going to take your tube, slide it up, and go ahead and screw the two into each other. It got a little difficult by hand. Grab your 24mm. Just get it as tight as you can in your hand, and when we go to put it back together, we'll clamp it in the triple tree, and then we'll take and just make sure that that is all the way tight. So now just kind of double check, make sure you got some resistance there. Just pump it up and down a few times. Wipe her down. Anyways, so now these forks are ready to go back on the bike. So it's basically just the reverse of how you got them off.